No, just put the front part on it so it's 3
Oh yeah, so it just tilts it up.
Oh, like the other, yeah, okay.
Me too.
Oh.
Can anybody see me through that little thing?
No.
Yeah, you can see your head.
You can see the top of my head.
It's hard
Wait,
to see
if
the
you
light
stand
in
up,
there.
you can see
Here,
all
how
of
about
you.
this?
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
Good?
Yeah, that's good.
I stand up?
No.
Yeah.
Oh,
you
yes.
can see.
Sorta?
No, yeah,
Does it cut off this?
No, it doesn't.
No, you're good.
Oh, good. I mean, there's no hair up there, so it doesn't matter. Great. So, welcome to class. We've got a bunch of stuff to do today. Today we're doing something new again. And so for today's class, we're going to. I've got something like 3 learning goals, three things I'm hoping that we accomplish together. One, I want to look at this Avogadro article itself with you and some of the music that's related to it, and just think about how it works. Think about the example as a way to, as one piece of sort of urban African conflict that helps us think about conflict in a broader variety of ways. But second, I want to think about it as an example of how a scholar constructs a discussion or a literature. This is so a discussion or a literature is sort of the way that a scholar places their work in somebody else's interests. And this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do over the course of the next several weeks. Is construct such a discussion ourselves, and then come up with a research project that's going to fit into it. And so today is our pivot point to that. I'll say one other practical thing, which is that I do not have essays graded, and I probably won't have them graded until early next week. That's the earliest that will happen, due to a number of other sort of overlapping deadlines. If I get them done right then I'll be just in time to get ready for the big conference that comes up after that.
Where our midterm grades have completely based off our quick notes.
Your midterm grades are based off your quick notes and some ballpark estimate of the first draft of your essay. Since I had to file them before I actually even had all the essays in. So those midterm grades, take them with a grain of salt. Some people that I know just give everybody in writing classes where there's no major assignment that's already graded by then. Some people just give everybody. I mean, I don't know anybody in particular. The folklore was that people would say, "Oh, everybody give everybody an A- because, I mean, they're going to work for something, but you don't have enough stuff yet to give a really firm grade." But what I do instead, I take everything we have. So I take participation notes. I take the attendance records. I take pluses, checks, and check minuses in all the quick notes, and then I make an estimate of the project. So they're no way binding. If you're disappointed with your midterm grade, come talk to me about it. I think most people will find it to be, pretty okay. But yeah, they're pretty speculative grades. Different in classes that are full of things that are numerically or quantitative. So, first thing that I want to do is actually find my notes and then look at. There we go. And then look together. Not my notes either. I will say the other. We did have one adventure over over fall break, which is leaving me really scrambling for time, which is that on Saturday nights on our quiet, on our quiet side street in Trinity Park where crime is low, somebody came down to our carport and stole our car while we slept. We woke up the next morning, we were going to take my 3-year-old to a birthday party, and my wife said, "Where's the car?" So we walked up to the street, and I mean, this never happens on our street. And it was like skid marks, and somebody had hot-wired our car while we slept. And wow! And the policeman said, "Oh, that's just an easy car to do that with." Great.
What do you do now?
Well, see, we live really near work, and so it's not as big a deal for us as it would be for some folks. So people are lending us the car for the few things that we go there further away, and then I'm just taking the children around in a bike trailer. But unfortunately, yesterday my bike broke, so I'm driving around my wife's bicycle with my knees around my ears and spending my evenings fixing bicycles and hoping somebody finds our car.
What type of car was it?
Yeah. It was a 98 Civic EX, so if you want to avoid getting your car stolen, don't get a late 90s Civic. They're great. I mean, the engines last forever. Man. I think we would have got 100,000 more miles out of that car. But anyway, so that was an adventure. So take a look with me. What I'm going to do first, make sure the sound is on, is play a sample of some of this dancing for you. Some of this multi-sensory kind of art that Evor talks about, that has poetry, dancing, theater, costumes, all of these things, and you'll see this. This is not in Accra, but this is named for the same genre as one of the two groups, Zigbordi, and it actually happens in the town that group is from. So, we're going to watch about a minute of it, and then we'll watch it again. And the second time I want to take some notes. That's about 2 minutes. Now this time I want you to watch and take notes with whatever you can, and see what you notice here. Things that you notice just about the video, about the costumes, about the way the groups are relating. This is from a DVD. It's an NEH-funded DVD. It's recent. It comes from southeastern Ghana. It's near near the border, where these Ewe people that live in Accra come from originally. So this is a rural place, but it's a town, and you can see they're in a really big compound there with a walled compound where a large group is massed together, and you've got lots of different subgroups with different costumes. So have a look at what you can see in the video, and think too if there are spots here that remind you of the Vorkvidar article that are different. This is not the same group, but this is the genre of dancing and singing that's being discussed here. 1, 2, 3, go. So we'll stop there. So you can see there's a lot of intercutting and different scenes, all timed very well with the same song and from the same town and community. So
it seems almost like too structured. Like there seems like there's no like freedom in it. It's like not like a lot of the music videos we've seen before. It's almost like they're trying to like just have like the spirit come through you and dance via that. Whereas this seems like they have a dance set up, but it's not at all related to like faith or whatever.
Yeah, I think this is not really a religious occasion in this one. But it is really structured. What about it makes it seem that way to you?
It's just like everything's in like perfect formation. Like everyone's like like knows what they're supposed to be doing. And there's not like the guys in the background that are just like standing there watching. Like like everybody has like a set job, and everybody's just like almost like they're not like doing it their own way. Like they're doing it the way they're supposed to. Like they don't have their own flair to it.
So there's sort of a choreography, a set choreography to it, as you can see. Yeah. What else? Yeah.
I can see like different subgroups with different costumes, but at the same time, they're all dancing the same moves, which makes which creates the solidarity among different groups. like I think it has something in common with like what the author mentioned, because like the author said like the musical performance works to tie different groups together, and I think this is the example of how that musical performance creates solidarity among different groups.
Where did you see that happening in the video? What did you notice that made you think of that?
Because like even if they're wearing different costumes, they all like move in the same way, like the way they move their hands and like even the drumming and all the like entire musical performance is like similar to each other.
So two different readings of something of a common quality. There's some shared choreography, and that the music background is shared between all of these groups that are presented in this video anyway. What did y'all notice about the musical sound? Did it seem familiar to you? Did you notice particular instruments or patterns that were repeating, or?
I think it also showed the typical characteristics of average music, like parallel melody, and parallel half harmony, and vibrant rhythms.
Yeah, definitely vibrant rhythms. And how about the structure of it? I mean, is it? Did you hear different sort of groups of things sounding at once? Like, was there one texture that was there all the time, or did it change, or were there soloists, more than one group of singers, one group of singers? But
I guess I heard maybe more of a little bit of like a call and response kind of like characteristic to like a lot of the music we've been listening to. It's like there will be a soloist or just a smaller group of people singing, and then the wider congregation or wider group of people within that association will like also like chime in.
yeah, so it's a contrast between different. So here, what was it? Was it a soloist in a large group, or multiple groups, or what did you think back with your ears? Think with your ears.
It's a couple. There was like three of them, right? Because it starts out with seeing three of them dancing, then they go to the group.
Right. Yeah. So there's the three leaders that lead out, and then you have. I think there are actually two groups. I think the three get joined by others. But you have a call and response between two groups, two different groups of singers.
Sorry.
Did anybody notice what happened when the songs changed? What things changed first? So you have like
Costumes change.
Yeah, costumes change. That's true. And different people come out into the middle. When they show you the group that is all sitting in a big circle, you have different groups of dancers coming to the middle and people watching from the side. Did you notice how the music changed?
The drums didn't really change that much. It's sort of really odd meter that they're using with a bunch of different tempos and percussion sets going, and then sort of when they changed the song, they definitely sort of changed the time signature, but the drum pattern stayed the same. So
I noticed that too.
Changes the emphasis on it. Yes.
I think that's a really good observation. So the drums were pretty seamless, and somebody introduced a new song, and the drum pattern stayed the same in the background. I do notice like that the bass, the low drums change after that, but the
high,
that Gord Shaper
exactly.
is like this seamless texture. So I mean that's kind of an interesting and kaleidoscopic way to change song, right? Where you have different, and it's easy to imagine in terms of a sequencer. You remember the sequencer view I showed you guys to talk about texture? That you have something that you have some rhythmic pieces that are like loops that stay for a long time and they change at different times. This textural change resembles that, although it's obviously not a synthesizer, but it's easy to think about how it would work in that way. That voices change and then low drums change and the high and the high and shaker sounds stay constant. Let's see if we can find a chair for you.
Should I get one from outside or something?
If there is a chair,
I'll try.
If not, you can have my chair. How about I can stand up?
This is like video thing.
Tam końcu, tak długo
This classroom is a constant element in this class. But look, at least they left the markers here, so that's good. They took the chair, but they left the markers.
The mark is the most important thing.
The mark is the most important thing. Without them, I can't draw things up there that you can't read. And what about the costumes and the motions? Did you notice things in the way they danced that were interesting to you, or that different groups danced? What did you see? What do you think, Surya?
There's like one motion, like everyone knows that move, and sometimes they like hold hands.
This
while they-
forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And their costumes are all like either matching or kind of the same thing in like a different color.
Yeah, the groups of dancers that were together.
Yeah.
But is there any particular reason why, like, there are more women dancing than men?
Yeah, I don't know that. And did you notice? I do notice the gender. I do notice the gender difference that men and
Yeah, only men drum.
only men are
Yeah,
drumming.
men are
Exactly.
drumming.
Yeah.
Like women just like either dance or clap. That's what we do.
Yeah.
I was wondering like why women are not allowed to wear something to play drums. Why can't they like play instruments as guys do?
So I don't know. I know in some Ghanaian dance traditions there are the drums have ritual functions, and so they can only be played by particular people, and often that means men who are the ritual specialists for drumming. And that's true, and that's true in other West African contexts. But I don't know in particular for Ewe drumming. Ewe drumming, we can all find this out. In fact, Ewe drumming is a well-documented tradition. But I notice the same gender difference you do, and I don't have an answer for you beyond saying that it's common enough in other West African drumming traditions to have men be the drummers, and in some cases it's because there are ritual aspects to the drumming.
And even for like dancing, like man was in the middle of two other women.
I don't think they have any chairs.
No chairs. Here, take this one. You got somewhere to sit, please.
Thank you.
Because
All right, thanks.
I'm just standing up in the afternoon anyway. So what about the relationship between the groups? Did you see the groups do anything? I mean, Avogrador talks about this, a good deal, like the way groups perform in relation to one another. Did you notice these groups of people? I mean, it's hard to tell because of the way it's shot. It's intercut between so many different performers that are synced with the same song. But at least some of those performances seem to be continuous, especially the one in the big circle. Did you see people relating through dance in ways that did you remark on how any of the dancers related to one another?
Maybe it's kind of a stretch, but I guess in the article they're talking about how like performance aspects help like illustrate certain details or certain points about like conflict between groups. And so I just feel like in general, like the body aspect of like their music, like how, they seem like a lot more aggressive, I guess, than in like previous videos that we've seen. And maybe that's just a way of like asserting their like point, I guess.
Yeah. So some of the groups, and what was it about the way they presented themselves that seemed aggressive or assertive to you?
I guess part of it was also sometimes the dancers would have like different clothing or like different colors.
Right.
So like they would stand out more, but they would also kind of like be in the center of the circle, and so they would like dance outward to like everybody else.
So this makes me think of the part where he talks about giving a clap to people, and where they, he talks about how groups can address one another, how they turn and face them. And I think the circle is a nice image of how this could happen in a performance context. If you have a larger group of people that are gathered for such a competition, and people move into the middle, of a rounded space where, so like. What I think is nifty about this video is it shows one way that this could work in practice that isn't all that clear in Avogrador. Because if you read the Avogrador, you might imagine that this is like a theater, Right? You could have a competition like this in a theater, or we could have, I don't know, if we think about like a battle of a cappella groups at Duke. So how would the watchers be? How would the audience be situated for such a concert? I mean, I'm guessing you'd more or less you'd either be in front of them like this with the group at the end, or you'd be in a seashell sort of shape, with the group in a proscenium like an Arches concert. But this is in the round, and so it gives people an opportunity to address different groups by turning to them, so you can see and how in a performance space like that anyway you could model relationships and how you danced and who you presented yourself to.
So in the part of the video where it's just a circle, is that does that contain more than just the zigbordi? I thought this was just.
So zigbordi is also the genre of music. So he talks about that. He talks about the name, and it comes from this. It is associated with this town in the article. So this is the town name. This is the town that's named in relation to this genre of music in Avogadro's article and the genre from which zigbordi, the haberio, will get to their name. Which I'm pretty sure I'm massacring the pronunciation of that enlève ensemble. But that's what we're seeing here is the genre. Okay, let's talk about the article for a minute, and if it seems like the right moment to bring back this performance, then please do it. So, what did you remark on in this article? What did you note, flag, highlight, notice? What did you see in this? Why don't we do this as a circle discussion, and we'll try to gather things and make it real. So we're gonna start with Lori, and we're gonna go all the way around to Brad. So Lori, what did you find in this article that is interesting to you?
The kind of irony of this article was it shows that the musical performance kind of represents the ongoing conflict competition in Ghana, but at the same time it pointed out that musical performance can also integrate other groups and create the solidarity. And I thought it was kind of ironic, like the author succeeded in proving it, so that it was different from the other articles.
Yeah, I think it is, and I think it is particularly different in the way that it looks at conflict. So I'm really glad that you bring that part of it up. It's a perceptive reading. Is there any spot in the text that sort of illustrates that for you, or where you think that the author makes that especially clear?
On the page 261, around the end of the first paragraph, it says musical performance as a framework for constructing differences and in interrogating group economies. The way the author combining the words constructing differences and interrogating group, meaning that the musical performance can work both as a representation of conflict and the source to mediate different groups.
Yeah, really well said. And I think in looking at this little passage too, I think of your comment too, Jacob, where they say musical forms as a prescribed focal point of associational activities, the prescribed nature of such a thing, that you have to do it, that there are patterns by which you do it. You can see the comments you made about the music sort of coming back in this little bit of text. Colleen?
I guess one thing I liked about this article was, in proving the conflict, he not only drew upon the intergroup conflicts, like that was how he started out, and then he broadened out to show that it was like with other groups as well, like with the Christian churches, or how it could be like one member who's a member of multiple associations, and like, you know, like describing that like dilemma, like that passage about like the funeral and like what to do if someone's a member of multiple groups and they all have different rituals, like how do you solve that?
So it's really a lot of kinds of relationships that happen through these musical performances.
It's not just like a simple like or you know what we thought about in like the very first article where it was kind of the two different groups competing for sound. Here it's just all these different levels of conflict, like every level you can imagine, basically.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of I think really valuable ones there. The last one is relevant to this to the idea of religion as a part of these conflicts, where there's where people discuss how they are competent in, you know, Christian text. This is on page 273.
Yeah.
Where they mention funerals as a place that gathers all these people together. Does this make sense to you guys? Did anybody else notice this passage about funerals?
Yeah, actually, I noted something.
Well, so to talk about it.
He said that there's a kind of competition where when a respected member in society is dead, the group is required to provide financial support and like transport the corpse to for burial in the home, and they perform like music there. So
right.
Yeah, he really like supports his objective of his essay, like through a lot of examples of competition and conflict, like throughout the groups in the society.
So what is it about a person dying that does that for them? I mean, what is it about a person dying that makes a kind of focal point for different groups to come together?
Maybe they're like honoring like the person's life through the celebration, like they're celebrating the person's life, and they said it's like a respected member in the society.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so there's some status too, I suppose, that comes to the people that celebrate this. I mean, it reminds me. It makes me think of there's a lot of discussion of funerals in people that talk about conflict between traditionalists and Christians all over Southern Africa, because often when a person dies, they'll have relatives that are parts of different faith traditions and different groups, and so but they all have a stake in the person's death and what happens to them. So and they have radically different ideas about what happens to a person when they die, and how to enable the right things to happen when they die. So you get these occasions where people come together in the very same space and they make all these sounds together. So I thought this resonated with lots of discussions of how Christians and traditionalists come together. One thing that brings them together in space all over sub-Saharan Africa are funerals. It's simply because people are related to more than one faith. Sure. What did you see in this article?
Something that I liked about the article was like the author makes his main claim that like performances are used to expose conflict, and then he also provides like musical scores or lyrics, and then translates them so you can like readily see it for yourself.
How does it work? Can you find a spot where that happens and talk about how?
He does it on page 265 and 262. There are more instances, but on 262 he like translates it and puts it as, for us in this association everyone can join freely. The hostile can also join freely, and the econ can also join freely. So, like, no one should boast that he owns the association. So, he's, like, talking about what's unique to their group and, like, kind of why it's secret and stuff. And it's, like, that preaching through music thing again.
Do you think there is somebody who so these groups always seem the song you mentioned, all the lyrics seem positive. How do those lyrics express a critique or a criticism?
Well, I guess like sometimes, they like definitely elevate their status in comparison to other groups. Like by writing lyrics that say like, we have the best group, they're sort of insinuating that no, their group offers what they do and kind of come to their group.
It makes a lot of sense. So the positive statements they're comparative. They're implicitly comparative.
Right.
And they named their sort of calling out statements too. They're sort of a kind of boasting in a certain way. Sandy.
Yeah, I really like the structure of the essay, the article. In the introduction, from the very beginning, he talks about what he's gonna say. Like there's like this topic sentence in the introduction that he's gonna talk about how competition and conflict explain the performance art of this group, and also the topic lines of each paragraph also tells about what he's going to say later on, and also he provides various examples to prove his claim. So I really like that. But overall, his article wasn't that interesting.
So structurally, the article made sense to you. It was evident where he was, how he was going to do it and what his claim was. Was there something you wished he had done instead? Were there missed opportunities in there that could have made this more interesting for you?
Not sure. Well,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, I was gonna kind of answer that question, and I guess my kind of bigger thoughts of this article is that he just uses the majority of the essay just to bring up all these different examples that basically just lead to the point that hey, this issue's complex and it's not sort of one note, and to understand how conflict and competition play a role in performance culture, you have to examine all these different little aspects of it. And I guess a way that doesn't really, you kind of lose interest at the end because it's like, okay, so I get it. Basically, there's a lot of stuff here, but there's no sort of like unifying point that's sort of helping you to really kind of better understand how the situation is functioning or what's a potential way that we might understand how it functions. We just kind of have an idea that it's really complex.
Well, it's interesting because these are in a sense they're different. Those readings sort of contrast. If on the one hand the structure is really clear and there's a clear claim, or on the other hand, it's actually kind of hard to figure out what the specifics of that claim are. It seems like there are somewhat different readings here. Did anybody think does anybody want to take issue with this? Do you want to, John? I don't mean to derail our hacker here, but I think this is an interesting, or our circle here, but I think this is an interesting moment to think about. Is there a spot where a worker really makes an analytic claim that's really clear? You don't have you can file that and answer later, but you're welcome to answer it or to talk about whatever you were going to talk about.
I guess on 278. He talks about he makes kind of like a general claim, he says like the particular ways in which the finer details are conceived and articulated probably require a holistic analytical perspective that transcends the boundaries of fixed structure and norms. And I feel like, despite all of his like different conflicts and different examples, like it all does kind of come back to that point. And maybe it's not as like firm or specific a point as we've read in like other articles, but I think he does kind of try to tie that together. I don't know, but even with that, I guess I just got confused between all the different conflicts, like what exactly like performance does to like highlight each type of conflict. Like even at the very end, he's talking about like on 279, he talks about the difference between like rural and urban societies and how performance like differs between them, and I just feel like that's not like maybe the best way to like conclude like your article, because like you already made your point that like the performances do this, or like they help you understand better, and then just bring up another conflict at the end. To me, it's like confusing, I guess.
So in the end, you see this paragraph. You see a new conflict coming up.
Yeah. Like how urban experiences down. Yeah.
New problems emerges that heighten the relationship between conflict and the production of musical culture in the city. Well, here he frames that as a conclusion, as shown by this case study and its supplementary evidence.
But I feel like that's not the main point he was making with this article. Like, maybe he can make that claim from his case study, but like that's not exactly what the essay said it was going to be about.
Right. Yeah. So this seems like he's sort of mixing up sort of side points into his conclusion. Did anybody get? I mean, so where are these groups performing? Like, what is the context for the performances that are, and who's performing them in this chapter?
In context of it.
Where is it? Where do they take place?
Urban area.
Yeah, in an urban area. In which one? Yeah, exactly. It's in Accra. So the same as the urban space where we talked about the God Traditionalist Council and the Pentecostals and the Drum Wars. But this is a different group, right? That was the God Traditionalist Council, people that are from that area, from Accra. The Ebe people are from other parts of Ghana and moved to the city. So, but from these different towns. So when they, and this is a really common dynamic. I'm missing the page. Previously, when they said, where's this? They say the people from Dzodze they outnumber us. This is the Libene sort of complaint. There it is. The natives of Dzodze, they're more numerous than we. That is Dzodze is the town where the video that we saw was filmed. So that's almost 200 miles from Accra. It's east, on the east edge of Ghana. So this is a common thing that happens I guess it happens here too, right? I mean, it happens in North America too, that rapidly we're moving to cities, and that this creates opportunities for little microcultures micro cultural groups that represent formerly rural areas. But I guess this is one of the things that's happening here, and I think you're right. Maybe it is a side point, but it's an interesting bit of context that I just wanted to make clear that urbanization is a common dynamic in Africa. It's happening really fast, and when it happens, I mean, one thing that's kind of interesting about this is that when we think about urbanization, we often think about sort of inter-ethnic conflict, but this is all members of the same ethnic group. They're all members of the same larger tribal group, and this is not about them fighting with the Ga or fighting with the Akan or other groups. They're expressing regional differences among themselves, like the little town. Imagine that you moved to the big city and the little town rivalries that you had from whatever little town that you were from, if you were from a town, they show up when you're in the city. You're talking about your town and neighboring towns. It's one way to think about kind of what's happening here. But I think I agree with you that there are many more important things, and certainly more portable things. More things that other people who aren't that interested in Ghana could be interested in this essay that show up in it. So Ray, what?
Yeah, building upon that conflict point, I thought it was interesting how all these groups are named after love and peace and all those beautiful concepts. But in fact, they engage in so much conflict. For example, the interpersonal conflicts, the inter-group conflicts, and the inter-group conflicts. All those conflicts were pretty interesting, and it was interesting how they try to merge different groups with one another so that they can sort of gain the upper hand in that murky battlefield. So it was interesting how that conflict was played throughout the means of music because of all the libel, you call it, yeah, all the defamatory music and songs and everything. So it was interesting to see how conflict was played out in a different sort of way from what we're used to seeing.
And that is on so many levels. But to say a little more about that libel thing, because I think that helped. That is an interesting aspect of the lyrics, anyway.
I also didn't understand the part of the libel because there's a it's like in the earlier part of the paper, but he says like the groups are really careful in naming like other groups that they're trying to accuse of because of libel, but like from the whole article, I get the impression that they're really like hostile to each other. So why? What's the point of like, not really saying the?
Yeah, you know what you're talking about basically, because like you don't really say it directly, but it goes roundabout and basically says the same thing.
So everybody knows who they're critiquing, but they do it in this elusive and poetic way.
Why do they have to do that? Like, that's somehow I didn't understand.
Yeah. So that is a really interesting question, and I guess what I would say is as an anthropologist, another way to frame the question that you can to play with this is to ask. So how do they do that, and what does it tell you about their social activities of disliking each other? Like presume that the disliking each other between these groups is a social activity that they share, and then ask sort of how they do it. So how would you answer that question? How do they criticize each other in these ways? What?
Well, in the lyrics, first of all, they don't like specifically mention like other groups' names, but they have enough implications that anyone who has like any sort of knowledge about what is going on should be able to understand what the implications are. So like, I'm not really answering the question, but that's also the reason why I don't understand.
So what do they have to do in order to do that, though? Like, what do they? I mean, what is a group? So let's say a group wants to, criticize another group or talk about themselves in relation to them. What do they have to do in order to do that?
Like dance it out almost.
So they perform a dance. Totally right. What other things do they have to make to go with that dance?
They have to make dance into almost like a scene out of like a theater scene almost. Like it's not just like a dance in itself, but it's like almost like an interpretive dance, I guess. Like
So for example, the parts where they offer claps to other groups and so they show networks of intergroup associations do that in the performance. And how about that's really right. That is an excellent observation. And how about the textual production, making up the lyrics?
Like you gotta make like the music that goes with the dance, and then I guess like lyrics that go with the music.
So I mean, I don't know if this goes anywhere to answering your question, but it is really interesting to think about the conflict as an occasion for making that, like that, because of the norms by which conflict is managed. Conflict then means that you have this enormous cultural production. Like you wouldn't have to. I mean, you could just drop the gloves and have it out. I mean, that would be simple and direct, but it wouldn't be cultural production. And at least what happened, the how of this, I think, is interesting in that conflict turns out to be really creative. People do all these creative things. Too.
In my case, I have to compare the conflicts between these Hubble clans with the conflicts between the God traditionalists and the Pentecostal church because they're both located in Agra.
Right. Yeah.
So first of all, according to this passage, sorry, I've just deleted it. There it is. When the clans battle musically, the lyrics usually contain some accusations, threats, and belittling comments. But when the Pentecostals and traditionalists, when they had to exert their influence musically, the musical lyrics, for instance, for the Pentecostal church, they sang songs, gospels such as "Blessed be the name of the Lord." So they basically try to loaf the integrity of their own by deifying their own gods or deifying their own beliefs, whereas the Hagogos try to undermine each other, just like hip-hop artists nowadays, like this each other.
Do you think? I mean, could you use the Habebe, these urban associations as a way to, like, if you took this, way of making texts that these other people do, and you used it to comment on the Pentecostals. Could you come up with a different reading of the Pentecostals? I mean, is deifying your own God, does sort of attributing one primacy to your God mean criticizing someone else's? Because I don't disagree with your reading. I'm just trying to think of the implications of what you're doing. You can make this. You can use the Pentecostal and traditionalist case to generate a reading of, or to compare these two cases. But can you take the patterns of relationship in these two things and what does each case look like from the perspective of the other? That's kind of the question I'm asking.
Basically, they both seem to have the same aim to merge. So to persuade others to merge into their own groups, but it's just they're taking different methods.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a neat thing you're doing, and something we should keep. Well, let's stick it up there on the wall and keep it there. So let's see. So who hasn't gone yet over here? Yeah.
The cool thing was how conflict was expressed, not only in the dance, but there's also the conflict almost between the groups, and that they competed against each other to see who could do it better. It was almost I found it interesting. That was a conflict within a conflict. It was you're acting out a conflict, but you're seeing who can act out the conflict better.
Yeah. That is very interesting. So that there's this, and you're judging it,
and you're creating another conflict
by acting it out.
Yeah.
So there's sort of some kind of acceleration or something that happens in between the relationship of these groups. That is a neat observation. Is there any sort of part of the text where that really surfaced that we could look at?
I mean, it's in there a lot. I don't know if there's any specific.
The whole thing is about these performance scopes, so I think that makes these a kind of general comment on the text. So, Brad, how about
I thought it was really cool or really interesting how he used these sources. Usually they just say that they talked to somebody and they said this, or the music meant this to them, but in this case he actually has the full script of the interview, or has the full translation of the lyrics and what that means, and it provides sort of a much more powerful background to his argument with sort of real official translations of what's actually going on, as opposed to more of the story of what he did, more of a first-hand account.
So he quotes. You're talking about the way he uses evidence, and he quotes interviews and translations to much greater, where other people kind of tell you, here's what happened to me, and this is from my field note. But here he's actually got a recording, presumably, and quotes it verbatim at length.
Yeah, that was a lot more powerful than a lot of others.
So what makes that more convincing? Why does that work so well? I think you're right. That is something I hadn't thought about that. But he does that really well in this.
There's a lot less room to there's a lot less sort of interpretation, or sort of room for a gray area. It's much more black and white. It's much more, this is what he said. I'm not paraphrasing it to go with my argument at all. This is the literal translation of the songs and how they perceive the context, things like that.
So it makes his sources really, some degree of transparency between his interpretations and his sources. And yet, the meanings of those songs aren't all that transparent. Right?
Yeah.
At least me, if I was just reading them, if I took out his text and I just read them, I probably wouldn't get it. So there's some work that he does around them too, to work with those sources that he makes evident for you. So what have we said? What there is to be said about this article collectively? Are there things that people wanted to say that we haven't explored?
Touched upon everything.
Okay, good. All right. So indeed, this was a tour de force of this article. So I want to zoom in on one part at the end of this and talk about sort of the conclusions of this as a way into thinking about what we have to do in the in the next couple of weeks. And so let me look at that with you first. This is going to be sort of lecture-y, so please just interrupt me if it doesn't make sense, or you have a question or you want to talk about it. There's no need that I do not have to yak on it. I invite you to interrupt me. So let's look together at, if you can open up the syllabus and the assignments, that'll be useful to you, and we'll look at those together. I would probably do it with just the syllabus. I can tell you what's in the assignments. So this is, I think I mentioned this before, but a lot of my courses have this kind of structure that we've had this semester, where the beginning of a course is pretty highly directed. Like, I tell you all the readings, I put lots of constraints in the things that you write, maybe too many, and I'm very, very directed in the things that you produce for class, although you make them, so I mean you have a large impact on what we actually talk about. But in the second half, if you look at what's up here, so here's a Volkmador today for the reading, and if you look down over the next 9, 10, 11, 12, you'll see there's no required readings. None. This does not mean less work, though. Actually, it's probably going to mean more work. I'm hoping it will, but I'm hoping it'll be fun and interesting work, and it will produce readings for us in class. What we're going to do is over the next week, we'll come up with what I'm calling a scholarly discussion. Some people call it different things. People call scholarly discussions. They might say things like, well, in the literature, blah 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 happens, as if there were this sort of body of this sort of literature out there that just was, without anybody to organize it, or to say what it was. And I like the term discussion better because it has an active quality, and it suggests that people have to organize it and name it, that people are involved in it. But what a discussion is, it's the part of a paper where a person says, here is a line of thinking, in a given discipline or in a given area of interest that I can trace among multiple scholars, and I can see here's the ideas as they move between these different scholars, and then the scholar uses it to place their own work. The scholar has to make that. That is not that part of their text. They have to write it. They have to go and research it, figure it out, and write it. The discussion isn't just there, self-consciously in and of itself. So, but that's the spot of the text that we're working on first. The spot where somebody says, here's how a question has been constructed and investigated, or here's how an area of interest has been established in the literature, and here's where I see where it prompts me to go. And that's the next thing that we're going to do in this course. We're starting on it today by talking about it, and on next Monday we'll have a library session where again, was KJ in your session? Okay, well you're going to get KJ this time, which is great because she is awesome. She's that African and Afro-diasporic studies librarian here, and so she'll work with us along with Hannah Rosier, the Div School librarian, and Laura Williams, who's the music librarian. So we'll have all three of them there, and I think they'll all be useful to us. And they're essentially we're going to consult with them and try to construct a paragraph of that type of that says here's the way people have looked at these set of things. Only we have to make up that set of things. We're going to make up a scholarly discussion. We have to find it. We have to find things that are out there, but we define the parameters of it, and we talk about how those texts relate. So a discussion like that's good for a couple of things. Let's just mention after that, pursue research using any kinds of bibliographic or media sources that we have available to us. I'm presuming we're not going to do ethnography because we're much too far from Africa. So instead we're going to do textual and bibliographic research in a way that's going to be placed in this discussion eventually. And these classes will be opportunities to bring those things in and talk about them. So there will be readings and texts. There will be readings and texts that you will have done and that you'll bring in and that we'll work on together. So the idea is that the classes will be sort of an ongoing conversation as our research develops up until here, week 12, not too far away, 4 weeks from now, when our first draft comes in of writing project 2. That's the project we're doing.
Is Bostock 23, is that where Bostock is that?
I don't know. 23, I presume it's on level 0. Yeah, I think you're right. It's on the ground level anyway, with a 0 before it.
Where is Bostock?
It's connected to Perkins, yeah.
Oh, okay.
You know the overpass that goes or that.
I think you'll be able to find it like if you go downstairs from the Perkins, because like the basement is all connected.
Yeah.
Okay.
The only level not connected is the ground level.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, but it is the thing right next to Perkins. So a discussion does a couple things for you. I'm going to talk about what a discussion does, and then we're going to look at an example of it in Avogador and talk about how he does it to try and make it concrete. But why you would want one? There's 3 things that a discussion does. One, figuring out what people have said on a topic helps you figure out what there is to be said on it and where to find data. So it's a really good way. It's a good way to start working on something. It's a good way to begin a research project because it tells you here's the kinds of things people have investigated for, here's the places they've found data to explore, and here were their findings, and here are the things that they haven't done yet. So it helps you set up research questions to have a discussion in mind. It tells you who cares about your project, right, and who's done things in it. So that's one thing that it does. The second thing it does is the second thing a scholarly discussion or identifying a scholarly discussion does is it provides you a moment of theory in your paper that helps you make ideas. Right. So remember the contrast between analysis and theory that we've talked about in different, analyzing different scholarly papers. So what's the difference between those 2 things? Which one is about data and which one is about ideas? I mean, they're hinges; they're connecting to each other. But which one is ideas about the data? Which one is ideas about ideas?
It's just a mind.
Huh?
It's just straight with your mind.
Indeed. So it's a theory. So theory is a spot where you are moving away from the data and you're talking about how your ideas relate to the ideas of others. Analysis is when you're talking about your cases. Theory is a spot, and a scholarly discussion is a very nice way to do this, where you can show here are the building blocks of ideas that other people have put out there, and here's how mine fits in. So it's a chance to sort of show what your materials are for making this idea, and how they fit together to make a new idea. It also is a chance to. This is your third thing about it. It also is a chance to invest in an economy of ideas. So this is another way to think about scholarship that has come up a couple of times in this class. Scholarship, on the one hand, you can think about as this kind of pure exercise of making ideas and making cool things happen, making new insights into the world or creating knowledge. But none of that really works unless people read, cite, and use it, right? So you have to, all that knowledge and all those ideas have to circulate. Just like currency and goods and people and so forth have to circulate. There is an economy of ideas in which scholars invest. They have to have other people cite them, use them, read them. And a scholarly discussion is a key tactical way to do that because it tells the reader. It could either tell the reader that they are part of the group with which you are conversing, or it could tell the reader that they like the group. They also cite the people with which you're conversing. And either way, it gives them a way to hook into your work, and it's an invitation to cite you, to read you, to use your work in something new. So those are the 3 things that I think scholarly discussion is useful for. One is making a point of departure for your research project. The other one is making new ideas, and the third is sort of an entry in a in an economy of ideas in which scholars have to work. Your ideas have to have currency. They have to flow to other people's papers and to other people's work. Okay, so I want to show how this practically works here, and I think this will be somewhat familiar to you. So for me, these things, the really key part of this paper, and the thing that I liked about it a lot, are the ways that is what Laurie identifies in it. The ways that he says, on the one hand, conflict and competition is a problem. On the other hand, conflict and competition are a productive set of relationships. So when you're in conflict with somebody else, you're in a relationship with them. You don't not care about them. You do care about them. In fact, you invest great energy into them, and you create things that are directed at them, even if they appear negative. They are evidence of a relationship, and a relationship that ultimately makes things right and makes things happen. And this was a very interesting aspect of this paper for me, and I see that happening right at the beginning of this concluding section here. In an analytic statement, not exactly a theoretical one. It says, musical performance and the phenomena of conflict and competition inform each other in very resourceful ways among the urban Anlo Ebe. So this last section tells you this is about my case study still. I'm not kicking this free of its data yet. I'm going to tell you. I'm going to sum up some of my observations, and then he goes on to talk about what several of us have complained about, that he, I think rightly too, that he says, and this is very complex and you have to track a whole lot of things and you can't assume that it's all going to be just so, that it's all going to be neat little boxes. But as he moves on here, he's talking about how you need holistic analytical perspectives. You transcend the boundaries of fixed structures and norms. The conflict and competition provide an important framework for experiencing performance in very creative ways. No longer is he talking about the Anlo Ebe. He's talking about creativity and conflict and how they relate with one another. And then he moves back to the Anlo Ebe again. So this is this kind of pivoting between theory and analysis, right? Like things that I could quote and use fairly and generously from his work to talk about something else. This is familiar. This first paragraph is familiar to you. The second one is the spot where he identifies a discussion. This is the second last paragraph of this. And this first sentence is probably, you can imagine it as a set of search terms. Yeah, that he might have, in this paragraph probably took him forever. Or at least it took him a while. Although they certainly are well-known folks that he cites. So there is a growing body of research that focuses on competition in African urban contexts. Almost every one of those, if you took one of those and plugged it in as a keyword, you could find some of these texts, right? And they're united mostly by sort of allied disciplines too. He's citing throughout this. He's going to cite anthropologists and ethnomusicologists. He's not citing everybody. He's not citing political theorists or quantitative sociologists or epidemiologists or any other folks who are invested in these areas of Africa. He's citing cultural people who study culture. But then he traces a history. And if you look at the dates. Here he shows 1956 Clyde Mitchell, 1975 Terence Ranger, and then the idea that they established that competition promotes innovative approaches to musical performance. So here you have anthropologists, and then now here he says, particularly ethnomusicology has started to pay attention. So now you have Bruno Nettle, who's an ethnomusicologist, 1978, 3 years after Terence Ranger, and then down here he cites a whole new set of people that are the end point of his discussion, right? That he has Bars and Gunderson. These guys are American Africanists. Bars is at Vanderbilt. I can't remember where Gunderson is. David Copeland's book on performance. Mike Roman, who is at Texas. So now you're in the 80s and the 90s, right? And remember the date of this article? It's 2001. And so the end point of this is him. The end point of this is to trace a discussion and to show how it ends up with the things that he's investigating here and what precisely is new about it. To say that in urban African contexts, we've already looked at some of these dynamics of competition and conflict and how they prompt creativity, and I show the unique ways in which performance culture is shaped within the processes of competition and conflict. I don't think that's quite as forceful a point as the one he begins with, which is the one that I find the most interesting. He ends up with this sort of set of particularities that he's contributing. But this section here is exactly what I mean by a scholarly discussion. He had to put that together. Terence Ranger and Clyde Mitchell had no idea that in 2001 Vorkbedor would say, "Here's the conversation about conflict and competition in urban African musical performance." He had to say, "This is what I'm interested in." He had encountered these groups before. He had some hunches and some senses of what he wanted to write about, and he went to the library. He went to the archives, and he found these texts. He found them and put them together in this form that helps us see how he's building his ideas, who should care about them, and also where he fits and how in his future. And I want to show you one other thing here too. If you click the little link to me here, you can see. Let me look at the end of this is my article from last year. The end, you can see what happens to scholarly discussions. They change into other ones. And so here I have a long piece that is all about, that tries to establish a scholarly discussion about how about conflict and the way that it is as a relationship. And I pick out different people who are none of whom are writing about North America like I am. So it's sort of an ideational set, but they're writing about urban competitive performances in lots of different contexts. In First Nations, Native American people in Ghana, and in other contexts, like a friend of mine who wrote a book about the music of 9/11, the music related to 9/11. And so this is my attempt anyway to make a scholarly discussion that morphs out of, in some ways, out of Vorkbedor's. So when the discussions don't stay the same, if somebody makes one, you can take that and use it as a building block to make something new, so that to make a new such discussion. So here's what I want you guys to do for Monday. By the time we get to Monday, what I want you to have is a sentence that's something like this. That is something like, well, this I don't know if it's going to work for us here. It's something like this sentence here. There's a growing body of research that focuses on competition in African urban contexts. I want you to think about the things that have been most interesting to you so far in this course. Think about what you wrote in writing Project 1, what you read, what you encountered in terms of music and dance so far in this course, and write out a sentence that gives you something to search for. So what are the qualities of things that have interested you most? Have you been interested in religious groups in urban places? Have you been interested in conflict or in ritual? Have you been interested in the role of gender or ethnicity among these groups? Have you been interested in Ghana in particular? Come up with some analytic ideas, some places, some ideas about people, and write a sentence about them that expresses a relationship between these things, and bring it into class. We're going to use it as a source to look for a discussion of this. You're probably going to have to change it, right? But it's a starting point for a search that is going to, hopefully by the end of next class, have the beginnings of a scholarly discussion that you're constructing.
Do we have to upload it on the...
No, you can just bring it. I mean, you can post it. That would be great. It'd be easy for other people to see it then. but I don't think I've assigned it, so you may just bring it along yourself if you like. See you guys Monday. Have a great rest of the week.